thanks for everyone for coming tonight to listen to us, and thank you so much, John and 한호일보 editor Mr. Ko and the chairman Raphael Shin for inviting us to talk. I think this is really amazing. I was just talking with Sam and John before. I really wish we had something like this when we were starting out. A couple of years ago, it was so hard to find out any information about post-production or visual effects. So I think it's an amazing opportunity to all get together and just talk about it and try to learn from each other. So thanks very much for organising it. Just for people who don't know really what visual effects is about, so I'm going to talk about visual effects for the first bit. And I just picked like a selection of 3 projects that I worked on. And I'll just play it in the background. I'm not really going to talk about it, but it's just to give you an idea of the variety of work that you might work on if you work in visual effects. And just a crazy amount of tasks that you might be asked to do as a visual effects artist. And just give like a rough indication of what you might do if you do that job. Those projects that you see are just, it's not just all my work, it's a combination of hundreds of artists as well. So it basically represents what the entire company of visual effects do, how they deliver the shots. A lot of it's marketing material. They call them like before and afters. They show like what's shot before and what the visual effect company contributes after. So a lot of it's put on DVDs. If you ever seen making of DVDs for movies, and a lot of it's on their websites for promotional material to attract clients and stuff. But these ones are from Weta Digital, which is where I work at the moment in Wellington, New Zealand. Hobbit 2 and Hobbit 3 movies, and then after that series of videos, there'll be I worked at Industrial Light and Magic in San Francisco. There was a movie, Transformers. And so just some before and afters of that. And then the last clips will be children's animation, which was at Sony Pictures in Vancouver. So it's very cute and cartoony. So you see like a broad range you might be involved in visual effects, and 3 very different companies as well, in 3 different countries as well. So you kind of see the whole scope of the industry. Okay, so just a bit about myself first. I originally started animation and visual effects about 14 or 15 years ago. After school, I originally did medicine, but it really wasn't a very good fit for me, and personality-wise, and it really wasn't my passion, so I wanted to do something more creative, and animation and visual effects really was a perfect marriage because it combined drawing and art, which I love, digital media, and filmmaking. And I started working in commercials originally in Sydney for about 3 years. My first job was at a company called Lab in Sydney, doing commercials. And then I got my first film job, which was in San Francisco, in Industrial Light and Magic, working on the Pirates of the Caribbean film franchise. And then for the next 14 years I worked on film mainly, and I've just been working most recently the last couple of years in New Zealand, which is where they make the Hobbit movies, and it's called Weta Digital in Wellington. So yeah, just if people don't know, what does a visual effects artist do? Like, what do we actually do? Because it can be a bit confusing when you look at those kind of things. Basically, visual effects artist creates elements that were not shot by a real camera. So that's very different from what sometimes people get confused with practical effects, or what they used to call special effects. That was the age before computers, but still used today, of course. But they use a lot of pyrotechnics, a lot of real rain, cloud tanks. It's real things that they film to pretend there's a real explosion, real blood. That's practical effects. Visual effects artists don't do any of that. They don't do anything real. Everything is never filmed with a real camera. So that's a distinction there. So a lot of the young people, when they're first starting out, they ask me, how do I get involved in visual effects? Like, where do you start? Do you need to have a computer science degree, or do you need to know computer engineering, or do you even need to like computers? The answer is no to any of those. You don't need any of those. Or a lot of people think, do you need to be an amazing drawer or painter or illustrator or amazing artist? The answer is no as well, is that you don't need any of those as well. And some people think, oh, do I need to be a filmmaker? Do I need to know how to operate a camera or editing or script writing or cinematography? You don't need to know any of that either. And so, I mean, if you do know, that definitely helps, but it's not very important at the start, because it seems like a white-collar job, visual effects, because it's kind of marketed that way, but it really is an art job. And all arts jobs are like a master and apprentice kind of relationship. You start as a very junior apprentice, and you're not a very good artist, and the master, through experience and projects, teaches you, and over 10 years you become an artist. It's like that. So when you start off, you don't have any computer skills, any art skills, or any filmmaking skills. So that's not important. So what is important is, I think the most important thing is the personality for any career that you choose, you know. And I try to summarize it, because personality is so complex, you know. But if you have, this is what I broke it down into, I think, for not just visual effects, but I think any career that you decide to do. If you've got passion, patience, persistence, practical things, like there are very practical considerations about this career that you have to think about before you start, and professionalism. So these 5 areas of your personality, I think, are the most important thing you need to think about when you want to decide to do visual effects. Because a lot of young people, especially the courses and the universities and the marketing materials, they promote that you need to study the art or computers first. But I really believe it's the personality that you have to get right. And make sure that your personal passions line up with the practical aspects of this job. And so I want to try and talk very practical, like hands-on, how you can work out if you have a passion for visual effects. And the good news is that it's never been easier to work out than it has now. When I started 15 years ago, it was very difficult to understand how to learn the programs, and you really had to either be an intern in a company, or you had to spend a lot of money because the software was so expensive. You had to have very advanced computers, SGI workstations or something like that. But now you can run the same programs that we use in the studio on your laptop, and off YouTube or off all those products websites on the internet, so many tutorials. There's really never been an easier time to learn about visual effects if you want to, And if you think you're interested in it, the best thing to do is just to do some visual effects. And you can do it by yourself. No one needs to teach you anything, because all the tools are there. It's very exciting because there's only 2 programs that you use primarily. I mean, there's more, but when you start, you only really need to know 2. One is called Maya, the other one's called Nuke. And one's 3D and one's 2D. You don't really need to know the details at this stage, but 20 years ago, these programs were so expensive. It was almost impossible for anyone to learn them unless you went into a studio and worked there for free, just so you can have the opportunity to work on the computers. And now the programs are all license free for students, so anyone can download the most high-end program, Maya or Nuke, for free and use it forever, as long as you don't make commercial products with it, if you're just learning it. And so it's amazing. They're just giving away all this software for free. Anyone can learn it by themselves. And on their websites, there's so many tutorials. So my advice for anyone that's interested in visual effects is first download Maya or Nuke or both preferably because it's free. And do a 10-second animation. Doesn't matter what it is, how basic, but give yourself 12 weeks to learn how to do it by yourself. If you spent like 4 weeks coming up with a story or an idea and looking at all the tutorials on YouTube or on their websites, and you spend another 4 weeks doing it every day, and then you spend another 4 weeks polishing it, so that's 12 weeks, you're going to find out, it sounds like a long time, but you're going to find out after those 12 weeks if you have a passion for visual effects. Because we see a lot of young people now coming into visual effects that get hired at the studio, and they're amazing artists. There's a really shortcut way to get into visual effects, and that is you just do an online course, you make a show reel for 2 minutes, and you apply for a job, and you just get a job like that. Because there's a lot of demand for jobs at the moment in the film. But the problem with that is a lot of the young artists, they don't understand the reality of production, and it looks cool, everything we're seeing here, and I was just saying before, the job is very uncool. It's super boring for some people that don't like it. So if you do this, take the time to download Maya or Nuke and try and make a 10-second animation, at least 10 seconds, for 12 weeks. You're going to find out at the end of the 12 weeks. Assess, first, did you finish it? If you didn't finish it, that's a good indication you don't like visual effects. Even though you love looking at it, if you didn't like doing it, that's a big indication that you should maybe do a test with something else. And then, second, did you have the patience to learn it in 12 weeks and pursue it, because it takes a lot of patience, because it's a bit difficult at the start. So if you found out after 12 weeks you were very bored, or it was like the most horrible experience of your life, and you never want to do visual effects ever again, then that's a good indication that you're not going to like the job. Because what you do in those 12 weeks would just it will be very basic, just spheres and cubes and something. Like a man walking will be just like really blocky and really ugly looking, probably, but that is exactly the job. There's no difference what you do by yourself for 12 weeks and the actual job when you work in the film studio. It's exactly the same. So if you didn't like that, then you're not going to like the job, basically. But let's say you loved it. But if you loved that process and you had a passion for it and you had the patience, the next thing in the personality is persistence. This is a big area of the job that you have to understand is you have to continually change your work, because you're not a filmmaker. A visual effects artist is not a director. A lot of people think working at a film studio for visual effects, you're going to make the story, but visual effects artists have nothing to do with the story, nothing to do with the editing, nothing to do with the music or the sound. We just deliver what the story, what the director is asking for. And so if you create a project for 12 weeks, you should ask someone, your friend, to ask for a change, a really big change in your work. Like if you animated something of like a guy walking, you should ask your friend to say, change that into a lady and have like a frog attack her or something. And you should try and do that in the next 3 weeks. If you can do that, then you've got the persistence bit of your personality, because that's what you do every day in your job. You spend about 12 weeks on a shot, and then the director doesn't like it and you have to change it in 3 weeks. It's pretty much what you do every day. So if you do that on your own little project, 10-second animation, and you change it, like a really big change, even if you don't like it, but you just do it because you have to, then you've got, all right, you got the passion because you enjoy doing Maya or you. You got the patience, you spent 12 weeks doing it. And then you've got the persistence, you changed it again, even though you're a bit sick of it, you changed it. So you got those three. So you got those three. The next thing to think about before deciding to do visual effects is the practical thing about the career. And no one tells you about the practical side because a lot of the universities and a lot of the online courses, they're very expensive. They don't want to scare the students. And you know, a lot of the time they just want your money. But the practical aspects, I'm just going to talk about film particularly because it's different for TV and games. Film, if you want to work in film and visual effects, it's a global, it's like a global workplace. There's no one place you're going to work. So it's almost guaranteed you will leave Australia if you want to work in visual effects for film. Up until now, there's only one major visual effects company left in Sydney, and they're Animal Logic. They're even doing next Lego movies in Vancouver. You know, you're going to be working in Vancouver. You're going to be working in San Francisco, New York, London, LA, Sydney, Melbourne, Wellington in New Zealand, Singapore, Beijing. If you don't like that idea of working in all those different places, then that's the practical side of the job. That's the reality. And a lot of people have the passion, the patience, the persistence, but when it comes to the practical bit, they realize, oh, I didn't know I have to leave Australia, or I didn't know I'm going to have to move away from my family, or my girlfriend, or my boyfriend, or, you know, what's my wife going to do? And if you've got children, you have to take them with you. Like, what's going to happen there? It's, but that's the reality of film work, because film traditionally has always been location-based, and visual effects is exactly the same for film. It's wherever the work needs to be done is where it's going to be done. And it's not going to, it's very rare for it to be done in one spot. It's always Sydney, US, London, wherever it's the cheapest as well. The other practical thing that you have to consider when choosing this career path is the job employment. It's next to impossible to be a full-time employee at a studio. Almost everyone is a contractor, sole trader in Australia. In other countries it's different, but different names, but you pretty much are a free agent, so you don't get the same benefits that full-time employees will get, like superannuation or paid holidays or things like that. So you have to make sure you always budget for those times, because your contract typically, if you work in film anyway, it's different. I'll talk a bit later about television and games, it's a bit different. But film, if you want to work in film, visual effects, typical contract is 6 months or 9 months. It's extremely rare to work over 12 months on the same project. And there will be gaps in between because you have to find your next project after each one. So you have to save a lot of money to fill in those gaps of employment. So they're the things to consider. And if that's your personality, like you don't feel comfortable, you'd rather have a more secure job or full-time job, and you don't feel comfortable traveling to different countries every 6 or 9 months, then you're not going to do visual effects in film. It's going to be very rare for you to do that. What you're going to, if you still got your mind set on working in visual effects, but you want to stay in Sydney, or if you want to stay in the one place and try and be a full-time employee, then you can definitely do that in television, and particularly in commercials, which most people that stay in Sydney work in either television series or commercials, and games as well. Games is a bit of an odd one because it can do both. Can operate either depends on the employer, they can operate like a film studio, so have multiple locations around the world, but traditionally it's very similar to more of the IT industry games, so it's much more traditional, like full-time employment, staying in one city. So that's the practical applications that you have to think about, because the worst is spending a lot of time studying only to realize what the reality is like. So that's, I talked about the passion, the patience, persistence, the practical applications. And then I'm just going to touch on the big one when you're starting to look for a job. Just say you're happy to do all those things and you really still want to pursue visual effects and film. The next thing that's going to make you succeed, is professionalism. And this is a point that kind of ties in with the persistence, and that is your attitude at work. It's not just like showing up on time and coming to meetings and your communication skills. That's all important, but the biggest thing that studios need from the artist is to be able to accommodate the client. And the client is the director. So having no ego about your work and being able to just change whatever you're doing to whatever the director wants is professionalism. And of all the years I've been working, the people that really succeed and are employed all the time are people that have no ego about their work. They don't think they're very good artists, but they always have no problem changing their designs to suit the client. And that's the most important thing for young people to realise, because universities and the colleges, they don't really teach that. Well, maybe now, but when I went and did my course, they didn't really teach that aspect of it, the professionalism side. And I see a lot of younger visual effects artists come in and have a lot of difficulty changing their work because they feel so precious about it, or they don't have the right attitude, and unfortunately they don't get hired again. And because it's such a small industry, your reputation travels with you around the world, and you really need to foster that professional kind of relationship and build that reputation. And yeah, so to finish on, I'm just going to tell a story about like 3 people that I went to school with, visual effects artists, and their careers. So the first guy that I went to school with, he was the most amazing drawer I've ever met in my life. He could draw like from memory, just anything. And he was just fearless. He had like so much confidence in his abilities. And after we graduated, he got a job like that. I think he was the first one in our class to get a job because his portfolio was so impressive. But I think after about 3 weeks, they let him go. But after that, he got another job just like that because his portfolio was still so good. But he just kept going from job to job. No studio kept him. And he just lacked passion. He just wasn't interested actually in doing it. Like, he was an amazing artist, but he just wasn't interested in doing the actual job. Like what I was talking about, doing that 12-week, just that test. Like, he didn't like the actual program, like making stuff. He loved the artwork and seeing the final part, but he didn't have a passion for doing it, which is, if you don't have that personality, it's very boring. And if it's not the right fit for you, you're going to be miserable. And so he didn't have that, so that's why he changed careers and did something else. Second artist that I worked with was amazing artist again, worked extremely hard. He was very, very patient. He had all those 3 things: passion, patience, persistence. He got a job straight away like the other guy, but once he was in the studio, he was very difficult to work with. When asked to change his work, he would never change it because he thought it was perfect, or he would always argue, oh, why does the director want to change it? It should look like this, you know? And the supervisors, they just don't have time for that kind of thing. And yeah, same thing happened to him, you know? Very soon people found out he's a very difficult person to work with, even though he was one of the most amazing visual effects artists out there. The last guy was the worst in the class. He was the worst artist ever. He originally was an IT programmer, so he was like a typical non-artistic personality. And his show reel was like the worst at the end of the year. And he couldn't get a job. Almost everyone got a job, and he didn't get a job. And so he went back to IT, was working as a programmer during the day, but you know, after evenings he still continued making the show reel. as hard as he could. And he kind of stayed in contact with him a little bit. I heard about what he was up to and stuff, and then finally told me he got his first job, and that was 3 years after he graduated. So he spent 3 years working in IT. He went back to his normal job, but for 3 years he still plowed on with it. He didn't get his perfect job. He started off in the camera tracking department at Animal Logic, which is a very entry-level job. It's very, even for visual effects, it's very boring, a bit very like an intern kind of position. But he really applied himself, and they didn't let him go. He worked there for like years, which is unheard of in the industry. And he just went from place to place, getting this amazing reputation. Most recently, he worked at Industrial Light and Magic on the latest Star Wars. And I work with him now. It's like at Weta Digital in Wellington. And he's, I mean, still now, he's not very, like, everyone knows he's the worst visual effects artist. He knows he's not very good, but boy, he's got passion. He's got so much patience, persistence. He's like considered all the practical things. He moved to London to work on Star Wars, and man, he's the most professional guy I ever worked with. And the companies, the studios, the directors, they absolutely love him. Like, they don't care that he's the worst artist, but if there's a hard problem, man, they'll give it to that guy over anyone that's better, because they know that guy's gonna like solve it one day. And they'll give him extra time, which is really unheard of in the industry. So I just want to, make young people realize that being an artist is not important, but having the right personality is all that matters in the end of the day. Because you're not going to be a great artist in doing a one-year course. It's going to take 10 years of getting, working in that master-apprentice kind of relationship. And studios, they don't care if you're a bad artist. They really don't care. What they care about is that professional side, your personality. And they can tell if you're passionate, if you've got the patience, if you've got the persistence, if you understand the practical aspects of the career. And if you're professional, I mean, you're just going to love it, and they'll love you. And if you've lined that up with visual effects, it just happens, all those things matches with visual effects, then it really is, one of the most amazing careers you could have. Thanks very much. Talk to you later.